Our next speaker is Demmy Verbeke. So he is working as a head librarian of the Faculty of Arts at the University of Leuven. And he's going to talk about librarians taking liberties, the role of academic libraries in research. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I want to start with two confessions. The first confession is that listening to your talks of the past 2 days and talking to you, that more and more I started to realize that what I'm about to do for the next half hour is actually preaching to the converted. So I apologize for trying to convince you of something you're already convinced of anyway. And the second confession is that I'm definitely guilty of at least 6 of the 7 deadly sins. But in a professional context, I'm particularly guilty of the sin of envy. Envy of colleagues who work in a place which looks like this, or envy of colleagues who work in a place looking like this. Because of course envy tends to make things look less complicated and nuanced than they really are. But what I imagine in my envy is that people working in either of these two kinds of places know exactly what to do. Working in a place that looks like this will evolve around innovation with a focus on the future of information management and information skills and on getting the best out of a top-class digital infrastructure. Working in a place like this will evolve around the precious physical collections and about finding a balance between protecting the treasures entrusted to the care of the library, whilst at the same time making them available for research or sharing them with the audience at large. And so the mission of these places like this and the translation of this mission into actual practice seems to me, in my delusional envy, to be non-problematic and clear to all parties involved. But what do you do when you work in a place like this? A library which is neither a treasure trove of valuable books nor an impressive household of digital infrastructure. These are pictures of the library I'm trying to run, namely the Arts Faculty Library of the KU Leuven, an academic library serving the needs of the students and researchers of the faculty by providing access to recent scholarship. We also have small heritage collections, such as a unique collection of Dutch translations of classical texts, which will return later in my presentation. But generally speaking, our collection is a users collection, focused on modern publications, and thus not focused on books as physical objects of beauty, but as carriers of information. And it will come as no surprise if I admit that this library is going through an identity crisis at the moment. And one element in the identity crisis is that it has a split personality, this library, in the sense that it is condemned for at least another decade or so to make a combination of printed and electronic material, because we are working in subject fields where printed materials are still important and recent scholarship still appears in both formats. Another element in the identity crisis is that this library needs to redefine itself, needs to redefine its own place in a complex system of other libraries under the umbrella of the University Library of KU Leuven. I apologize if I seem to go a little bit in managerial mode about this, but it is important to understand our structure, to understand the choices we make. So the Arts Faculty Library is just one of the libraries within the Humanities and Social Sciences group, which are actually financed and run by the faculties themselves, rather than by the University Library as such. And that is not to say that we do not collaborate with the University Library, or that there are no services organized on a central level upon which we also depend, like you see their digitization unit, the metadata unit. There is Libis there, known to most of you. There's also the Central Library, which is responsible for the preservation of the older materials. But it is important to know that we're currently going through a reorganization, which will probably lead to a structure more or less looking like this. We're not entirely certain yet. A lot of important decisions are being taken in these couple of weeks, the next couple of weeks just before the summer. But we will probably end up with a structure looking like this, whereby a number of libraries will fuse and or change position in the organizational structure, including the Arts Faculty Library, which will most probably join forces with some other sections in a new organization called the Artes Library. So that's not a spelling mistake there. And I said this reorganization process has actually deepened our identity crisis, because we're trying to find a place for ourselves in this new structure and are trying to determine what we are all about. And I think that is one of the secrets maybe of looking for gold in ourselves, is when you need to redefine yourself, when you start questioning what do we actually do and what are we good at, what we should we focus on. And it is about this identity crisis that I want to talk a little bit. First, by sketching out how I personally see the future of the library I'm trying to run, Second, I would like to sketch the institutional context, which will explain why this is tied up, in the case of the Arts Faculty Library, with the digital humanities agenda of the faculty and the university in general. I would like to discuss also how I personally see the role of the whole digital humanities, of libraries in the whole digital humanities stories. And finally, and I think maybe because Saskia, who talked to me, who is unfortunately not here at the conference, but she said to me, make sure to include a project. So I hope that in the last 10 minutes I will actually be able to talk about an actual project. And so I would like to illustrate how we have translated all this theory and all this management speak, I haven't used the word bullshit, I said management speak, into practice by presenting some projects, and especially one little project, which is about OCR and NER tools that we're currently testing, so tools for optimal character recognition and named entity recognition. In a sense, you could say that the current mission of the Arts Faculty Library is still clear. Just like basically every other academic library in the world, our mission is to support the learning, the teaching and the research executed at the institution we are a part of. But I do think that this mission is problematic once you start thinking about how you can translate this into practice nowadays and how you can foresee the future translation of this into practice. As said, we're still working in a hybrid environment of print and electronic at the moment and are trying to develop services for both students and staff in both formats. And that seems to be working relatively well for the time being. But what will happen in the next couple of years if recent scholarship, even in the more traditional academic subjects we are trying to support, is communicated more and more through digital media? And then working within this complex system of libraries which I just described, it is clear that we cannot reinvent ourselves as keepers of books, keepers of precious books and heritage materials, because that is what the Central Library is already doing now, and what this new section called Heritage and Culture will be doing. So that's not for us. We can also not reinvent ourselves as a learning center, because we already have an excellent learning center in Leuven, namely the Ahura Learning Center, which opened its doors in April 2013. So that's also there. And besides, I'm not against building brand new learning centers, and I'm not even against transforming existing academic libraries into learning centers, and thereby shifting the focus of these libraries entirely on the learning and teaching part of the original mission statement. I am worried that we are losing sight of the third element in the mission statement, namely to support research. And for me, it definitely does not have to be an approach of a story of two different approaches going head to head, but rather a story of complementary evolutions, as was shown in a white paper by Greg Gibson in 2012 and recently argued again by Donald Beacon, the man behind the concept of an information commons. And in this vision there is room actually for a three-level development with information commons, learning commons and research commons. The information commons is the earliest form of bringing computing services into library spaces, typically focused on individual workstations rather than collaborative spaces. A further development is the learning commons model, which will bring learning support units in and also reconfigure spaces and services to enable group work and consulting. And both models are still primarily geared towards the students. Yet further development, however, is more geared towards researchers, PhD students, master students, professors themselves. And for that, this focus on more specialized services, such as dissertation support, data services support, support in the use of textual analysis software, visualization software, etc. And that is also how I see the development of the Arts Faculty Library, or Artist Library, namely to slowly but surely take up more and more of these tasks which are typical of a research commons, and of course specifically tied in with the research of people working in the faculty itself, in the Faculty of Arts. This could take the form of transforming part of the library in a researcher's zone, as has been done recently in the Faculty Library of Social Sciences. This part of the library is only accessible to researchers, PhD students and visiting scholars, and offers a brainstorm area, a silent area with workstations and a meeting room. I'm all for this, but I'm not convinced that this is necessarily the way to go. I think personally that it is more importantly to organize our support of research as a service rather than as a physical space. By keeping in place a good team of reference librarians who work closely with the researchers, in particular academic fields. I also see an important continuing role of faculty libraries in the development of the academic bibliography and the institutional repository, not by building it themselves, but by being the middle man and woman between the level of the individual researcher and the unit he or she is working in, and then the central level of the infrastructure that actually is behind this academic bibliography and this institutional repository. And I would also like to see the team of reference librarians develop into a team of experts who can advise the researchers in the fields of plagiarism, copyright, open access, and digital humanities. And it's this last item on the list that I want to discuss in more detail, because it is explicitly linked in the publications by Craig Brown and Beagle with their vision of a research commons. And it is particularly relevant to my story because the digital humanities is a field that is currently booming in Leuven, as it is probably booming in most other universities anyway, all over Europe. So one of the driving forces behind these local DH initiatives in Leuven is the Digital Humanities Task Force of the faculty, a group of individuals bound by an interest in supporting and promoting digital humanities research at the faculty and the university in general, which has organized, sometimes in collaboration with other DH groups in Flanders, a series of events in the recent past, including summer schools, workshops and lectures, bringing together national and international scholars as well as young researchers, and more established ones around themes such as social network analysis, digital editions, e-publishing, e-learning, 3D and imaging. Another element in this institutional context that I need to work in is that the past year, not one, not two, but 3 different positions, academic positions, in the field of digital humanities were advertised at the University of Leuven. So there is a new chair in the Department of Computer Science for a colleague applying computer science techniques in research applications for DH. There is a professorship in DH, and particularly human media interaction, within the Institute of Media Studies in the Faculty of Social Sciences. And there's a position in DH focused on methodology, with an emphasis on data analysis and the visualization of large corpora in the arts faculty. And all these 3 people have been hired, it's been known who they are, and they all start in September, this year, September. And then a year after that, and that is sort of breaking news because we only had news last Saturday, that this program was approved. So the Flemish government, in their final meeting before the elections, approved that we could start a master program in the academic year 2015-2016, which is an advanced master in digital humanities, which has a program consisting of digitalization components, a management component, particularly project management, master's thesis, but of course that's the old name, it will take the form of a project or an internship, and then a set of electives called Tools for the Digital World and Application Domains. And so those are just a couple of few examples that hopefully illustrate that the digital humanities have found a welcoming home at KU Leuven, which as a result means that the library, at least in my opinion, should get involved as well. And I say in my opinion because to me digital humanities is a collaborative process between 3 circles of expertise. You have humanities research, you have information technology, and you have information management. So between researchers, IT people, and information professionals or librarians, whereby it is of course very possible to combine more than one role in one and the same individual. But what can we then contribute as libraries? The Library Council of the Humanities and Social Sciences Group at KU Leuven tried to answer this question last year in a policy memo describing the current services offered by the libraries, but also offering a frank discussion of the opportunities and challenges ahead. And among other things, me and my colleagues identified a number of areas in which we would like to take up our responsibility. And the list includes digitization projects, both initiating them and supporting them, supporting relevant grant applications, because of course you need to bring in money, for instance by taking over the writing of the more technical or the more financial sections of a grant application and helping the researchers to translate a research idea into a feasible project. Supporting DH projects from inception to completion and beyond, so getting involved in the writing and planning of them, being involved in the actual project, for instance by supplying digitization services, and being involved in the preservation of the research results once the funding runs out for the project. We also would like to develop training in DH tools, preserving and managing research data, and playing an expert role in the field of scholarly communication. For me that is tied up with the whole open access question, but that is a topic for another discussion. Those are all good intentions, but they also found a concrete expression in concrete plans for the future reorganization, in the sense that we are hoping to create a new expert position for DH within the Artes Library, so that we have a person who's freed up to support the application for any execution of DH projects. And the proposal is also that the Artes Library will act as the home for a Center for Digital Humanities, which will be coordinated by the person who is appointed to the professorship at the Arts Faculty. I have discussed our intentions for such a center in another presentation, so I will limit myself to saying that the thinking behind placing this particular center in the library is that I hope that this will help bridge the gap between research on the one hand and infrastructure on the other hand, so that we avoid having too many ad hoc solutions and get the best out of our investments also on the long term. A second reason is that I hope that the support from library experts and the library infrastructure itself will connect DH researchers at the various faculties of KU Leuven and beyond and provide the glue that bind all DH efforts on campus, not only in the arts faculty, but in the university as a whole. And a third reason, which I will never put on slides, is of course that I see this as a means of channeling some extra money into the library. If we are a partner, the deal is that we will get 5 or 10% of every project that is approved. So, in order to show that we not only talk the talk but also walk the walk, I propose to devote the final part to a brief discussion of what we actually do, including a bit more detailed presentation of a small project in which we are currently involved. And I think the biggest contribution to research from the University Library in Leuven at this moment is in the field of digitization. So that is that first bullet point that we wanted to do. I think that is what we are already doing now. And that is mainly thanks to a state-of-the-art digital lab housed in the Central Library, which also works with mobile equipment so that they can go and work in other places. For instance, they used the mobile equipment in 2012 to go and digitize a whole set of music manuscripts in the Vatican Library. The thing that they are perhaps best known for, some of you might actually have heard about this, is their use of the so-called mini dome. Which is a small lightweight dome of light sources and a digital camera, used for instance to digitize cuneiform tablets. Those tablets are very difficult to read with the naked eye, but if you digitize them in a specific way, they get a lot easier to read, and you can make 3D models of them and stuff like that. Same technology is now also used in the context of the RICH project, which is the aim therefore is to develop an imaging tool for graphic materials produced in medieval and early modern times, by visualizing the topography of book illuminations, of stamps, inks, seals, bookbinding stamps, and monitoring these in 3D. For instance, the cool thing about a seal, imagine you have a seal which is slightly broken, you have a lot of archival materials with seals on them. You photograph the seal, you make a 3D model of it using this technology, and then you can have at a 3D printer, you can actually make a case which is exactly the same size of the seal, or just slightly bigger, so that you can preserve the seal in a much better way. And it just makes also like book illuminations a lot easier to read and to study. I could also talk about Europeana Photography, a project aimed at contributing more than 400,000 individual photographic items to Europeana by digitizing the original carriers, for instance the glass plates, which is a project that is now currently going on. But what I really want to talk about is a small project about OCR and NER, because it is an example of a project which was initiated by the library itself in order to extend our services for research, especially in the field of textual analysis. And that is, of course, one of the primary focuses of the Arts Faculty Library, where you find linguists, literary scholars, and historians. So we are typically focused on textual material. I call it a small project because it consists of testing tools already developed by other people. So we don't do the development, we test it. And it is only a project that runs for a couple of months. We are involved from December 2013 until basically the end of this month. The project comes to an end. But I hope to show that we're hoping that this very modest project is our stepping stone to something bigger. The funding for this comes from Succeed, the Support Excellence Center for Competence and Digitization, which promotes the take-up and validation of research results in mass digitization with a focus on textual content, and it is supported by the European Union. And for us, that was an ideal context to apply for some extra money. In Belgium, it's not easy to apply as a library for sort of research and development money. But Succeed actually not only supports the validation of digitization tools, linguistics tools, and resources, but also supports their transference for exploitation in libraries and other cultural heritage organizations. So that's why we felt we could apply in that field. And we're certainly not the only library to take advantage of. There might actually be colleagues here who actually have also Succeed projects running. So the Succeed website actually has 13 libraries in 9 different countries, which have all signed up to test particular digitization tools. They're not all testing the same tools. You just pick 2 or 3 out of a list which you think is most relevant for what you're doing, and you get some money to actually test it. And document, of course, what you do during the testing period. The specific reason why we wanted to get involved is that we saw an opportunity to strengthen and expand our digitization efforts and to acquire some external funding to do so. We had realized, we were planning earlier, like about a year ago, we were planning a much more ambitious project, linked Latin data, where basically the idea was we're going to put an early printed Latin book under a scanner, and what will come out at the end is going to be linked data. And of course we realized, yeah, a lot of people have tried this before us, and you can't just come up with that. And the first hurdle you need to take is the OCR of the early printed books. And so we took a step back, and we are trying now to solve that problem first before we start thinking of anything else. Put more concretely, our end goal is to integrate OCR and NER where applicable in the digitization workflow at KU Leuven. And in order to do this, we were hoping to learn from digitizing textual material with a view to OCR. What we used to do is make gems of gems, make fantastic, beautiful pictures of beautiful books. But actually, that does not necessarily work if you then want to run an OCR engine or an NER engine on it. You actually need to sort of distort your images sometimes, do stuff with your images which make them look less beautiful, but which actually makes them a lot more palpable for further development. We also are doing this to understand a bit better the possibilities of OCR, and that is with a view to further development. So we might want to then turn it into TEI, or we might want to turn it into linked data. We wanted to learn how to enrich textual material with NER, which was completely new to us. And generally speaking, we just wanted to develop workflows around it and identify infrastructure problems so that we would be ready for new project proposals. So a team was put together of people from various divisions. The funding received allowed us to hire 2 student workers, and of course, as these things go, it's typically the student workers who are doing all the work, all the hard work involved. I should definitely say also that support was provided by the Institute of Dutch Lexicology, who helped us with many practical and technological questions, because they are the ones who actually built the tools that we are now testing. Yeah, project managers amongst you will recognize this way of showing this was actually what we then do with the execution of the following work plan. What we actually tested was this list. We were testing the Abbey Fine Reader engine to do the OCR with some extensions, namely the user pattern trainer and an integrated dictionary, which was built by the Institute for Dutch Lexicology. The aptly named Aletheia. Aletheia is the Greek word for truth, so we used the Aletheia tool to build a ground truth. We use OCR evaluation to compare OCR results to see whether if we train the engine with the pattern trainer, does it actually make a difference or does it not make a difference? And then we use a couple of NER tools, one of them actually developed within the Europeana newspapers project. There was a very small corpus because we were testing how we could check the quality of OCR rather than trying to already digitize hundreds and hundreds of thousands and thousands of books. So actually what we did was a very small corpus of 13 books, publications which came from the Preciosa collection of the Hulden Hebreeën, which is our collection, a special collection devoted to Dutch translations of Latin and Greek classics. And so it's all Dutch translations of Latin texts, comparable simple typefaces, which had not been digitized yet. So Augustine, Boëthius, Cornelius Nepos, you see the list there of books we actually ended up digitizing. And so what we did with these books is first take images of them and then use the tools to not only run OCR and NER, but also to check the quality of the OCR and NER results. So for instance, in order to check the quality of the OCR, we built a ground truth using Aletheia, and that is the workflow of Aletheia. We corrected about 50 pages manually by identifying the layout regions, the reading order, the text lines, the words. We did not do the last part, the glyphs, because we went for a corpus with easy singular typefaces, with all the same typefaces. We figured, and we were advised, that we could actually drop that last step. And this ground truth was then needed in order to evaluate the quality of the OCR, for which we needed to use the OCR evaluation tool. you see a simple screenshot here, so showing some of the typical OCR mistakes. A T read as a C, a B read as an H. And so we could then see if we tweaked it a little bit, does it actually help? So on the left-hand side, you have our ground truth. On the right-hand side, you have the OCR result done in a particular way. If you tweak the engine a little bit, does it actually give better results or not? So what have we learned? We have learned what changes we need to integrate in our digitization workflow if we want to use the images for OCR and NER, so that we can now better assess the amount of extra time and the exact processes which need to be taken into account to prepare and edit images for an OCR and NER engine. Perhaps the biggest lesson learned is that we now even better understand that we know not, that we need to learn a lot more. If we want to develop this ourselves, we will need to have to invest a lot more time and a lot more people in it. So we also identified areas where we see an area for further development and where we want to get involved ourselves. And last but not least, we also acquired a better understanding of our infrastructural needs. For most of you here, this will probably have been obvious from the start anyway, but we, for instance, did not realize how much processing power is needed to do NER. And we actually tried running it on a laptop or something like that, and then we quickly realized, okay, this is not working, we need to do something else. So I think we can be content with the results of this little, very modest project, in the sense that we have learned the lessons just listed, but also that this has been our modest entry into a network of libraries and software developers, which in my view will be instrumental when planning new projects and getting those new projects on the rails. And a final result, which is in a sense only a byproduct, but a very welcome byproduct, is the fact that we now have digital, fully searchable copies of 13 rare books, which will be made available for free so that they can be used more easily in research. And that is actually, that last result was instrumental in convincing the skeptics in our organization that it was a good idea for us to invest in this project, in the sense that we did not discuss with them our real motivations. We did not talk about OCR, we did not talk about NER. We just said, let us do this, and we will give you 13 free copies of books which you want for your research. And that is what we ended up using as our biggest argument to convince them. So I would like to conclude by reiterating the plea that in future reorganizations of academic libraries, we do not lose sight of the research part of our mission statements. A focus on this research part is my personal answer to the identity crisis which some academic libraries, such as my library, the Arts Faculty Library, is going through. And it is my guiding light in trying to find a place for ourselves in the new library system that is currently being constructed. My goal is to build an academic library and staff it with people able to continue to support the research initiatives of the scholars who appeal to them, but also willing to develop a proactive attitude by implementing elements of research and development so that they can prepare for services before the scholars even think that they might ever need them. Or to use the words of Bettany Nowicki, who is perhaps the most outspoken advocate for this type of research and development within libraries, I dream of a library that is which is able to set the conditions for the advancement of knowledge itself through the fulfillment of research desires yet unknown, unexpressed. In order to do this, library staff will need to get a minimum of space to study, to prepare projects and to collaborate in projects, because it's only by giving this space that we will be able to tap into the potential embedded in our libraries and in our staff to provide high-level support to research, or to even encourage the type of research and development which leads to even better services in the future. And I believe that this is one of the opportunities which is offered by the current wave of digital humanities, namely, to quote the 2012 MIT Press publication on the matter, that it gives archivists, librarians and curators, and I would say also IT people, a chance to not simply enlarge, but completely re-envision their communities, their publics and their missions. In other words, it creates the opportunity to question the all-in-all relatively recent division between scholars and librarians, and to argue for a type of scholar librarian who not only supports research projects, but also initiates them, so that we can better prepare for future research. Thank you.
I know you all want to get your lunch, but do you have any question before that? I was quite curious to know, in fact, So because you went through this identity crisis and you had to rethink the model of your library, do you think, because here in the audience we have people working for more technical libraries or medical libraries, so of course probably the digital humanities, it's not really the audience they can target, but do you think the model, the way you rethink the mission of your library could be applied also to other disciplines, or libraries working for more technical disciplines, for example?
I think in those fields it's equally important to just have you can call them reference librarians or academic librarians or people who are close to the researchers. Otherwise you end up, and that is what I saw happening in Leuven and I see happening in a lot of other places, you end up having fantastic central services and the researchers do not find their way to them and they do not communicate and they're building fantastic systems and not enough people are using them. And I think we need these middlemen and women being close to the researchers, and I think that is not just in the arts faculty, I think that's in all types of faculties, to actually bring researchers to the infrastructure and bring the infrastructure to the researchers. And I think that just goes for whatever field.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So now we have the lunch break, and I think we come back around at 1:30. So we are back here for the two last presentations of the conference at 1:30 here.
Thank you very much. I'm not certain indeed, Saskia said this. It might not be the right.
There's a lot of different libraries going through this crisis and wondering, like, well, we protect stuff, but now what do we do? And so it's a nice model.
I think I just saw, when I arrived at the library, I just saw, okay, I just started working at a library, but in 10 years, they will no longer need us. So we need to come up with a plan.
And I like the approach that we try to test what other projects were doing. And I think this is an interesting thing library should do, to look at what some projects are doing and try to reapply technology or just feedback.
I think we were not in a position to start developing ourselves. And there was a lot of developers out there who want people to test that stuff. So it just seemed like a good mix.
Hello. I'm from Denmark. We're scanning a lot of newspapers right now. And I was wondering, the experiments which you did, where you discovered that you had to deliver the images, scan them in another way to get the OCR software to work. Was that on the hardware level, or did you post-process the images?
It was both, actually. It was on the hardware level too, because they were, but in the sense that we typically use this very top-end infrastructure.
Yes.
And we don't really need to use that if we do it from OCR. We don't need to do it so we actually, I think, and that is the guy in the digital lab which came up with it and who would be the person to best answer your question. But his conclusion was, okay, we can actually save some pound of money on that software. We don't need to do it the way we did it when we do manuscript, illuminated manuscripts. We can just deal with a cheaper infrastructure. But then there's a lot of post-processing going on. Cutting the text out, indeed, that you do not have. We used to always, we would use the photograph, the books, as a physical object. So all the empty margins would always be there. But if you run that through an OCR, and if there's a spot on that, it recognizes it as a text part. And so we needed to cut them out, indeed change the colors. I think it's always black and white now that we use.
Do you mean grayscale or black and white?
I think it's black and white rather than grayscale. Okay. We tried it with a couple of it, and we just figured out what is the best option. I think it's now black and white.
That's very interesting.
But it might be grayscale, but I know we tested the various ones, and that's why we needed this sort of ground truth, because then that's like we could each time just try something else and see what gives the best results. And the reality also is, I think we come up now already indeed like, okay, we need to crop the page, we need to, you have all these sort of things that you can do for the process. But then also the training, and for each different book, there's a little bit of tweaking necessary to get the better results. And that is something that we also learned that, like, I do know for like the newspaper, the Europeana newspaper project, indeed there they came up, okay, we're going to do this. we don't go for like a 95% or 99% accuracy. We just need a workflow that is very quickly. And so they did a bit of testing, I think, and then they came up, okay, this is going to put a large majority, this is going to be a good result.
Yes.
So,
but you optimized down to the single code.
and for this we did. It's clear that we would not be able to do this for if we would want to start a big digitization. But I doubt whether we will start doing massive digitization of our books. I doubt it. I think what we will use this probably more for is trying to look they're trying to sell us a product, for instance, close here, that we will say, give us a trial of a lot, and we will test it using our global tools and stuff like that, and then we can decide which product we buy. I think it's going to be. I think that will be the
standard.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that will be the one, because I think it's an illusion for us that we will become a front runner in OCR development. We just don't have the means, and we don't have the. But I think we should become more competent, and we should actually know when they're trying to sell us something, what they're selling.
Yes, but it has been a problem for us too, because we are fairly newcomers in this scanning world, and we're using external scanning companies, and this whole. Is this a good thing? It's kind of hard. So the way it works in Denmark is that you make a proposal for a project, and then companies can deliver a little trial. So we actually had 5 companies, so we could at least compare among them. And then say, okay, these ones make it better than these ones. So it can be done at a certain level.
If you have enough companies indeed joining in, if the contract is big enough. I think the problem in Belgium might be, also depending on the rules, but if there's just not enough money, that there might not be enough companies who are willing or who are interested to sell this.
I think the whole project was around 1.5 million euros.
And that would get people's attention.
Apparently, that's again, it's hard to judge the